This happened in the year 2013 when I was around 12 years old. My mom moved me and my siblings in with my grandparents because we did not have enough money for rent at the time, and she needed to save. It wasn't a big deal though. They had plenty of room and I got to spend a lot of time making jewelry with my grandma, which in my little eyes was such a win that I didn't even realize we were that poor. It was our little pastime after school, and one of my favorite parts was the trips we would take to Michael's to get beads and materials occasionally. Michael's, for those who are unfamiliar, is a craft store similar to Hobby Lobby, and walking around in it is a little girl's dream when it comes to do-it-yourself stuff. One day in the late fall, we realized we had run out of wire for a bracelet I was making for my mom, so we headed out to our local Michael's to get more. This particular day was in winter, so it had already begun to get dark by 5 p.m. My grandma, having vision problems and a bad hip, entrusted little me to run in and grab the wire and pay for it, as we had done so many times together before. I was stubbornly independent, so she wasn't very worried about me. She parked right in the handicap spot in front of the store. The sun was setting and the light from the big storefront windows illuminated her car behind me as I walked inside. As I was standing by the display at the front, entranced by some Christmas decor or something, a man walked in through the sliding doors. I noticed him immediately. It was hard not to. He was tall, or at least I thought so since I was short. He was maybe in his mid-30s with dark hair, and he was wearing all black from head to toe. His clothes were a bit dirty, and I distinctly remember a big red logo on his hoodie. He had his hands shoved in his pockets and walked briskly into the store, almost frantically. I just watched him. He made eye contact with me for a bit too long, and then continued deeper into the store. I was immediately weirded out, but thought nothing else of it and went off to find the wire. I found my spool of wire, but getting distracted in the toy section was where I messed up. That's when I noticed him start to follow me around. Aisle by aisle I would be browsing, and he would just appear at the other end, pretending to look at stuff. He was muttering to himself constantly. You know when someone says something out loud expecting a response, but they aren't really directly looking at you. It was like that. As a kid, you don't really realize what's happening immediately, so I just awkwardly walked away from him each time, pretending not to notice him. In my little brain, I reasoned that he wasn't following me and walked all the way across the store to the wedding aisle to look at some stuff I'd seen when I first walked in. I figured there'd be no way he'd follow me there, but sure enough, while looking at the invitation cards, I got a spine-chilling feeling. I turned around and there he was right behind me, with his back to me, doing something, messing with something in his pants, doing something really vile to himself. I had never seen anything like that, and the sunken eyes he looked at me with still haunt me to this day. It took me a minute to process what I had just seen, but once I did, I immediately booked it out of the store as fast as I could. Jumping into my grandma's car, she seemed startled by my sudden appearance and asked what I got. I tried to explain what had just happened when I saw him appear in the sliding door in front of us, and the dread I felt in that moment was indescribable. He approached our car, obviously recognizing I was with my grandma, and knocked on her window. I hadn't been able to explain myself in time before she cracked the window and asked him if everything was okay. The man gestured to me with that same crazy stare and said something along the lines of, "She's a thief. She stole from there." I was mortified that he was trying to make her suspect me, on top of everything else he had just put me through. Thankfully, my grandma got the same vibes I did because she politely told him to back away and rolled the window up while locking the door. He suddenly yanked at her door handle, then swung both his arms up and started banging down hard on the car's roof, causing us both to jump and me to start crying. My grandma slammed on the reverse and peeled out of there. I've never seen her drive so fast. I don't remember much after that. Just the crying and holding a $17 spool of wire in my hands that I hadn't paid for. We called the police as soon as we got home, and luckily they immediately took it very seriously and requested the videotapes from the Michaels. A few weeks later, my grandma told me that they had found him. They mostly left me out of the investigation besides taking my statement, so as not to traumatize me further, I guess. She got the dent in her car fixed, and that was that. It wasn't until a few years later that my mom finally told me what had happened to him. It turns out he already had 1 battery charge and 2 sexual assaults on his record, one even being from a minor relative of his, like his niece or something. He had just gotten off work from the gas station across the street when he must have seen me walk into Michael's alone. I don't know what would have happened if my grandma hadn't locked her door, or if she had been in there with me, vulnerable to that man as well. So, scary freak from Michael's, let's please not ever meet again. This happened in 2014 or 2015. I am a female, and at the time I was about 20 years old. I will give you some context before letting you know what happened. I was studying in a lovely seaside city in France, and everyone was cycling all the time. Cycling to school, to work, to parties, and so on. It was a very safe place, full of tourists and students. I lived and studied in this city between 2012 and 2015. Up until the events I'm going to mention, I never felt unsafe, and I didn't hear anything from my friends either. In December 2014, my boyfriend took me to his engineering school's Christmas party. We were a large group of friends and mingled a lot. One of the guys from the group, whom I didn't know personally, left the party without anyone noticing. A month later, he was found dead in the harbor, and the police never figured out what had happened. I went online to check if there was any news, and it's still a cold case. I didn't know him, but I think about it all the time. Was it because he was alone? Did he fall, or did someone push him? Why didn't anyone care to walk home with him? Needless to say, the city started to feel a whole lot less safe. But at 20 years old, I didn't have the same understanding of such things as I do now as a 30-year-old. My life carried on. A couple of months passed and it was the beginning of 2015. A friend was assaulted badly while cycling back home after a party. He was found in critical condition, his body lying halfway on the road and halfway on the sidewalk. His head had been smashed on the sidewalk step, and his jaw was completely shattered. He was a big guy in every sense possible, not the sort of guy you could push around easily. When he was recovering in the hospital, he couldn't make sense of what had happened. He had no idea why he was attacked on his bike. The police didn't find the suspect or multiple suspects. 2 students my age in the same friend circles were brutally assaulted for no reason. I still cycled everywhere because I had no other choice. I lived 8 kilometers away from my school, and I didn't have any other means of transportation. This meant that I cycled approximately 16 to 20 kilometers every day, and I had been doing it since 2012. We're in the spring of 2015. I am cycling back home from a party with my boyfriend. I have had a few drinks, but I am not drunk. I am just tired. My boyfriend is annoying me because he is not waiting for me and the distance between us keeps getting bigger. Suddenly, someone jumps on me. He appears from nowhere and kicks my bike to the ground. I have been cycling so much that I am used to the bike. I let it fall between my legs, but I do not fall. I resist and stand up. It's a man. I reach for my bike, which is now on the ground, with my left hand. I'm trying to get hold of the handlebars. He kicks me, then my hand. He kicks again and again, but I'm already holding the handlebars. It hurts, but I'm lifting the bike. He says something, but I don't hear it. I see my boyfriend looking at me. He's a bit far away, but he's stopped cycling. He's going to help me. The man will see I'm not alone. I'm still standing and lifting my bike. It's been maybe 2 or 3 seconds since the man jumped on me. My boyfriend is looking at me and then he turns his back. My heart drops. He starts pedaling away. It's the dead of night and there's no one else around. I'm on my own. The man keeps kicking. He wants me to let go. My hand looks blue, but my grip is strong. I think about the other 2 students. They give me strength. I think about my boyfriend. The sight of him cycling away fills me with pure rage. I'll use this rage. The man is holding some kind of glass in his hand. I grab it with my free hand and smash it into his face. I'm doing it. I'm furious. I'm getting the bike up. Surely the glass had alcohol in it because it burns his eyes. I have a split second to launch myself and start pedaling away. He can't reach my hand anymore, so he kicks my bike one more time. I stand strong on the pedals. He tries to chase me, but I am faster. I pedal until I can no longer breathe. I pedal until I feel numb. That night, I know I escaped something terrible. Due to the stress, I couldn't describe the man. I'll never know for sure if my experience was linked to the other attacks. However, we were all walking or cycling on the same route. 10 years later, I can remember the look on my ex-boyfriend's face when he turned his back on me. Let's never meet either of these 2 men again. I'm a 29-year-old woman. I lived in a big city all my life. But at the beginning of April, I moved to a medium-sized town about an hour away from that big city, along with my sister and our 4 pets. This happened after a month of living here. My sister was preparing her final presentation for her arts undergraduate degree, which was going to be shown in the city, so she had to spend the whole day there to make her preparations. I was left home alone with our cats and dogs, so in the early evening I decided to go for a long walk with my 2 dogs. We walked for about an hour, but when we were about 5 minutes away from our home as we were headed back, I saw a man knocking on a door about a block away. I thought he looked a bit weird because he would knock on the door, look around, then knock on the door again and then look around again. But he didn't look dangerous, so I just kept walking since I had to pass by him to take the street that would lead me home. When I was about 10 meters away, he looked my way and started walking towards me. He was tall and slender and was carrying what looked like a box of candy. He asked me if I had any coins to spare. I told him, "Sorry mate, I only have my dog's poop bags. Have a good one." I was ready to keep walking when he saw one of my tattoos and stopped me. For some context, I have tattoos. I'm not heavily tattooed, but I have several on my arms and legs, and since I was wearing shorts, the ones on my legs were visible. The specific one he was looking at is of a ghost woman in a traditional Japanese style. As he stopped me, he said, "That's a really cool tattoo, would you give it to me?" I just laughed uncomfortably, thinking he was joking, but he was dead serious, just staring unblinkingly at my tattoo. He then continued talking. "No? So you're just gonna let the maggots eat it? Such a shame, it would be better if a person ate it." At this point, he raised his face and looked me straight in the eyes. with a very flat smile that seemed to be an attempt to be friendly but only made me feel even more uncomfortable. He then asked me for my name, and not wanting to antagonize him, I gave him a fake one. Let's say it was Regina. He then asked me if I lived in town, to which I also lied and said that I was from the big city and just visiting. He then told me he used to live in that city too, and that he lived on the streets downtown. He told me he used to rap on buses to get money, and just out of the blue started rapping about me, still looking me straight in the eye. He rapped about how I was very pretty, how amazing my tattoos are, and in his rap he said my name was Lorena. I corrected him and said my name was Regina and not Lorena, since I had a suspicion he realized I had given him a fake name and was testing me. He just smiled and nodded. He then asked me if I'd give him my number. I said that me and my dogs had to go home, that we were expected. He pointed at a butcher's shop a block away and told me that we could sit over there while I gave him my number, that it wouldn't take long, but I told him that I couldn't, that the one waiting for me at home was my boyfriend. But I was lying again since I was home alone. His smile faded a bit and he just said, "Well, that sucks." I wished him a good evening and turned around to leave, only for him to drop to his knees and grab my leg with both of his hands. He started caressing my tattoo while whispering, "It really is a goddamn cool tattoo." My dogs are pretty friendly and they were very calm during this whole exchange, but when he grabbed my leg, they started growling. I pulled my leg out of his hand, wished him a good evening again, and just walked away as fast as I could. I took a longer way home to make sure he didn't follow me, and once home I took a shower and scrubbed my leg really well, since I felt gross after all that. Luckily for me, I haven't seen him again, but for a while after that I made sure to cover my tattoos every time I went outside, just in case. I've recently gotten into cosplaying and attending conventions. Although I've been making my own clothes for a while, this year I decided to dive into cosplay. I've attended several conventions and this is the first time I've had a bad experience. For this particular convention, I wore my Supergirl cosplay, which I made and patterned myself. I was proud of how it turned out, and a few people asked for pictures, which I was happy to oblige. Later in the day, my friends had left, but I planned to meet up with some others later that evening. So I took a break and sat in a small seating area in one of the hallways. While I was resting, someone approached me and asked for a picture. I agreed and stood up to pose, but then he said something completely unprompted. "Thank you for being one of the few cosplayers that actually has the physique to pull that cosplay off." I was taken aback and said, "Excuse me." I immediately decided I no longer wanted to take a picture with him. As he tried to backtrack, I picked up my bag and began walking away. He then grabbed me and physically tried to block me from leaving. I shoved him off and firmly told him, "Do not touch me," before walking away. He shouted after me, but I didn't pay attention to what he was saying. I just wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. I didn't report the incident right away because I was focused on getting to my friends, but about 15 minutes later, I saw him again. I immediately made a beeline for the nearest staff member to report him. As I explained what happened, I noticed him walking towards me, standing about 5 feet away by the time I finished. He started to say, what I meant was that most cosplayers are overweight, but I cut him off and walked away because my friends were waiting for me. Like, dude, I knew what you meant the first time. That's why I thought you were being rude. And the fact that his first reaction was to try and defend himself instead of apologizing for grabbing me when I tried to walk away. Later that night, I followed up with ConOps, They told me they talked to him and put him on a watch list, adding, "I'm not saying this is an excuse, but he explained that he was autistic and didn't actually mean any harm." I told him that harm was still done, and he made me feel incredibly unsafe. The con-op staff said they would work on getting him banned from the weekend, but not from the convention as a whole. I only attended the convention on Friday since I had work on Saturday and Sunday, so I'm not sure if anything else happened after that.